My mother had been dead for 23 years when a lawyer looked me in the eyes and said 5 words that made my hands go numb. "Claire, your mother is alive." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your body chooses laughter when screaming would embarrass you. My mother had driven her car off Hawthorne Ridge when I was 19. They found the car crushed against the rocks below, her purse on the passenger seat, blood on the steering wheel. They never found her body. 7 years later, a judge declared Evelyn Mercer legally dead, and I buried an empty coffin beside my grandfather. But that morning, 3 days after my grandmother's funeral, attorney Henry Vale pushed a photograph across his desk. It had been taken 11 days earlier. My mother was standing outside a grocery store, older, thinner, her hair almost completely gray, but it was her. And on the back, in handwriting I had not seen since I was 19, were 4 words: "Tell Claire I'm sorry." Then Henry reached beneath his desk and lifted a battered wooden box. "There's something else," he said. Inside were 56 letters, every one of them addressed to me, every one unopened, and every one dated after my mother supposedly died. That was when I realized someone had not only lied to me about my mother's death, someone had spent 23 years making sure we never found each other. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 42 when my grandmother, Rose Mercer, died. Until then, I would have said Rose was the strongest person I had ever known. She raised me through the worst years of my life. When my mother disappeared, my father, Thomas, became a man who could go 3 days without speaking unless someone asked him a direct question. Rose did the opposite. She filled every silence. She showed up with casseroles, schedules, college applications, clean laundry, unsolicited advice, and the firm conviction that grief was something you defeated through productivity. "Keep moving," she used to tell me. "Still water goes bad." It was terrible emotional advice. It also saved me. At least, that was what I believed. Rose paid part of my college tuition when Dad's accounting business nearly collapsed. She helped me through my divorce at 35. When my daughter Sophie was born, Rose sat beside me in the hospital all night because my ex-husband was stuck at work. She had flaws. She was controlling. She could turn a suggestion into an order without changing her tone. She never apologized when she could explain instead, but she loved fiercely, or so I thought. 3 days after we buried her, Henry Vale called and asked me to come to his office regarding a private provision in Rose's estate. I assumed it was about money. My Aunt Diane certainly did. Diane was Rose's younger daughter and my mother's only sister. She called me before I even reached Henry's office. "If she left you the lake house," Diane said. "Remember, I maintained that place for 15 years. That was Diane. She could make a funeral sound like a negotiation. She wasn't evil. She was simply terrible with money, worse with jealousy, and convinced that everyone else had received an easier life than she had. So when Henry told me there was an irregularity involving my mother, my first thought was not miracle, it was fraud. And the first person I suspected was Diane. Henry Vale was 62, careful, expensive, and irritatingly calm. He had handled some of Rose's legal affairs for almost 10 years. He slid the photograph toward me again. "Who took this?" "A private investigator." "Who hired him?" "Your grandmother." That stopped me. Henry opened a file. Apparently Rose had instructed him in writing that upon her death he was to locate a woman named Evelyn Martin living outside Eugene, Oregon. Evelyn Martin, my mother's first name, a different last name. According to Henry, the investigator had located her within 4 days. She confirmed her identity, he said. How? She knew details no stranger would know. That proves nothing. She also provided identification, an old scar consistent with medical records, and documentation connecting Evelyn Martin to Evelyn Mercer. I pushed the photograph away. What does Diane get if I believe this? Henry frowned. Your aunt? She has debts. She knows there's property involved. Maybe she found some woman who looks like my mother. Claire, how much? Henry went quiet. That silence made me look up. There is money involved, isn't there? Yes. Of course there was. Rose had created a trust worth just over $800,000, largely from selling property my grandfather had purchased decades earlier. The trust named 3 beneficiaries: Diane, me, and Evelyn Mercer, my dead mother. If Evelyn is alive, Henry explained, the distribution changes significantly. There it was, a motive. Diane received less if my mother was alive. But so did I. I stared at Henry. So who benefits from suddenly resurrecting my mother? He leaned back. No one financially. That answer bothered me more, because money would have made sense. Henry then pushed the wooden box toward me. The letters were in your grandmother's safe. 56 envelopes, all addressed to me. The earliest was dated 6 months after my mother vanished. The latest was from 4 years ago. My throat tightened. Why would Grandma have these? Henry looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time. I was hoping you could tell me, and suddenly Diane's debts didn't seem like the biggest secret in my family. I went to my father's house that afternoon. Dad was 70 now, broad-shouldered but shrinking somehow, the way men do when age starts stealing height they thought belonged to them permanently. I put the photograph on his kitchen table. He stared at it for almost a full minute. Then he whispered, "Where did you get this?" Not "Who is she?" Not "That's impossible." Where did you get this? I felt something inside me turn cold. You knew. No. You recognized her immediately. Of course I did. She was my wife. Was? He stood and walked toward the sink. That was Dad's weakness. Whenever a conversation became painful, he found something physical to do. Wash a glass, straighten a drawer, fix a hinge. Anything he could repair instead of a relationship. I told him about the letters. His hand froze under the faucet. Then he said something that redirected every suspicion I had. Ask your grandmother about Samuel Reed. Grandma is dead. Dad shut his eyes, then asked the lawyer. Samuel Reed. The name meant nothing to me. Dad disappeared into his bedroom and returned carrying an old photograph. My mother stood outside a motel beside a tall man in a suit. Samuel. On the back, someone had written a date, 6 weeks before she vanished. They were having an affair, Dad said. I stared at him. You told me Mom was depressed. You told me the accident probably wasn't an accident. I was trying to protect you. By lying? His jaw tightened. I was humiliated, Claire. That was the first time I saw something ugly in my father that I had spent 23 years refusing to notice. Pride. Not cruelty, not violence, pride. He had allowed me to mourn a suicidal mother rather than admit he believed his wife had wanted another man, and now I had another explanation. Maybe Evelyn Mercer had never died. Maybe she had simply chosen someone else. But when I tracked down Samuel Reed, he destroyed that theory in less than 30 seconds. I never slept with your mother, he told me. I was her divorce attorney. And then he asked a question I wasn't prepared to hear. Did your father ever tell you why she was afraid to leave him? Samuel was 74 and lived in assisted housing 2 towns away. His hands shook slightly as he poured coffee. He remembered my mother clearly, too clearly. She wanted a divorce, he said. Your father controlled the finances. Your grandmother controlled everything else. I felt defensive. My father never hit her. I didn't say he did. That shut me up. Samuel explained that my father monitored household money obsessively. He decided which friends were good influences. He hated public embarrassment. Whenever my mother mentioned leaving, he reminded her she had never supported herself financially. He frightened her, Samuel said, but not in the way people imagine. I hated how believable that sounded. Then Samuel said my mother had planned to take me with her. My chest tightened. She told me she was leaving the week after my 19th birthday. Then why didn't she? Samuel looked toward the window. Your grandmother came to see me. Rose. Again. What did she want? To convince me Evelyn was emotionally unstable and that encouraging divorce would destroy the family. Did you believe her? For about 10 minutes. He gave me a tired smile. Your grandmother was very persuasive. I knew that better than anyone. Samuel showed me a copy of an old note from his archived files. My mother had written it. If Claire comes with me, I can do this. If she refuses, I don't know if I'm strong enough. Suddenly, my memories from that year began rearranging themselves. Mom asking whether I liked Oregon. Mom asking whether I thought people could start over. Mom asking once whether I would still love her if my father hated her. I had answered each question casually. I had been 19, self-absorbed, in love with a boy whose last name I can't even remember now. I never understood I was being asked to choose a future. But something still didn't fit. If my mother intended to take me, why had she vanished without telling me? Samuel's answer was simple. She believed you told her not to come back. I stared at him. I never said that. I know. How? Samuel hesitated. Because the message didn't sound like you. And for the first time, I began wondering whether the person who had saved me after my mother's death might also have caused it. I drove straight to Diane's apartment. She opened the door wearing pajamas at 2 in the afternoon. There were unpaid bills on the table and 3 empty wine bottles beside the recycling bin. Diane took one look at my face and said, "You found the letters." That was enough. I pushed past her. "You knew?" "Some of it." "How much?" Diane's eyes filled with tears. I had seen my aunt cry before, usually when consequences arrived. She confessed that Rose had known my mother was planning to leave Dad. Rose considered divorce a humiliation. My grandfather had spent his life building what Rose called a respectable family, and she treated reputation like property, something to protect, something worth sacrificing people for. What did Grandma do? I asked. Diane wrapped both hands around a coffee mug. She met Evelyn the night before she disappeared. And I don't know everything. Stop protecting her. I'm protecting myself. That was painfully honest. Diane admitted Rose had paid her $15,000 years earlier to stop asking questions about Evelyn. Diane took the money. She needed it. She had gambling debts and 2 children to support. That was her weakness. Not dishonesty exactly. Desperation, the kind that lets ordinary people participate in terrible things while telling themselves they had no choice. Did Grandma help Mom fake her death? Diane nodded. I felt physically sick. How? The car, the blood, the purse. Rose arranged most of it. And you just let us believe she was dead? I didn't know until years later. You still said nothing. Diane looked at me and whispered, I was afraid if I told you what Rose had done, you'd hate all of us. I almost laughed. Because there it was, the disease my family had mistaken for love. Everyone lying to protect someone from pain, and every lie creating more of it. But Diane still didn't know the worst part, why my mother had stayed away. For that, there was only one person left to ask. The woman I had buried 23 years earlier. My mother chose a diner halfway between my home and Henry's office, neutral ground. I arrived 20 minutes early. She was already there. The photograph had not prepared me for movement. The way she rubbed her thumb against the edge of her coffee cup, the way her left eyebrow lifted before she spoke, the way she pressed her lips together when trying not to cry. I did all 3. I had spent 23 years becoming a woman who moved exactly like a ghost. Claire, my name broke in her mouth. I sat down. I did not hug her. I did not cry. I said, "Why?" She lowered her eyes, because I was a coward. I had expected an excuse. That answer hurt more. Mom told me she had planned to leave Dad and take me. Rose discovered everything. She told Mom I would never go. Then Rose offered proof, a handwritten note, supposedly from me. I know what you're doing. Go if you want. I'm staying with Dad. Don't contact me again. I believed it, Mom whispered. You believed I wrote that? You were angry with me that week. I was 19. I know. Her voice cracked. I know that now. Rose helped her disappear. She told Mom that if she came back, Dad would accuse her of fraud, destroy Samuel's career, and turn me against her permanently. Was all of that true? Probably not. But fear does not require truth, only possibility. Mom moved to Oregon, changed her last name, worked as a bookkeeper, never remarried. For the first few years, she wrote letters to me. Rose promised to deliver them when the time was right. None arrived. Eventually, Mom stopped writing. Why didn't you call? I demanded. Why didn't you drive back? Why didn't you fight? She looked at me for a long time. Because every year I waited made me more ashamed of the year before. That was the part no conspiracy could excuse. Rose manipulated her. Dad controlled her, but Mom still made choices. She let shame become a prison because staying inside was easier than admitting she had abandoned me. I stood. She reached toward me, then stopped herself. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. I walked out. Then Henry called. Claire, he said, there's one more document in the box. And what he showed me changed the story again. Henry laid the letters across his conference table, all 56. Then he placed one additional envelope beside them. Different paper, different handwriting, my handwriting, except I had never written it. It was the message my mother had received before disappearing, the note telling her to leave me alone. I compared it to a birthday card I had written Rose when I was 19. The loops, the slant, the ridiculous way I used to cross my T's. Rose had copied it almost perfectly. My grandmother had forged my rejection. Then Henry showed me a video. Rose had recorded it 6 months before her death. She sat in the same wingback chair I had seen 1,000 times as a child. Perfect hair, pearl earrings, straight back, no apology in her posture. If Claire is watching this, she began, then Evelyn has been found. My hands started shaking. Rose admitted everything. She believed my mother was too weak to raise me alone. She believed my father, despite his controlling nature, could provide stability. She believed divorce would destroy the business, split the family, and derail my future. So she gave Evelyn money, helped stage the disappearance, intercepted the letters, forged my note. And whenever Evelyn later begged to contact me, Rose reminded her of the supposed rejection. Then Rose said something I will hear until the day I die. I made the decision none of you were strong enough to make. Not I'm sorry, not I was wrong. She still believed she had saved us. That was the final cruelty. Rose had not destroyed my family because she hated us. She had destroyed it because she loved us in the only way she understood love, as control. I visited my father that evening. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat against the wood. I gave Rose reasons to think Evelyn couldn't leave me safely, he said. It was not the apology I wanted. It was better. It was responsibility. Dad admitted he had controlled money, mocked Mom's ideas, made her feel incapable. After she vanished, he invented the affair because anger was easier than humiliation. I spent 23 years hating her, he said. No. I shook my head. You spent 23 years protecting yourself from missing her, he cried then, quietly. Dad always did everything quietly, even breaking. Diane later returned the $15,000 Rose had paid her, though it took selling her car and emptying most of her savings. Henry waived part of his fee because, as he admitted, He had suspected for months that Rose's sealed instructions contained something unethical, but had been too concerned about professional boundaries to push harder. Everyone had a reason, everyone had an excuse. Nobody was innocent, especially my mother. 2 weeks later, she came to my house. I left her standing on the porch for almost a minute before opening the door. "I'm still angry," I said. "I know. I might always be angry. I know. You don't get to come back and be my mother because you're sorry." Her eyes filled. "I know." For once, she did not defend herself, so I stepped aside. Not because I forgave her, because I wanted the next choice to finally belong to me. She came inside. On my dining table were 56 unopened letters. We opened the first one together. It had been written 22 years and 7 months earlier. My mother had written, "Claire, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I hope someday you understand that leaving you is the worst thing I have ever done." I stopped reading. Mom covered her face, and suddenly I understood something Rose never had. Love cannot protect someone by taking away their right to choose. My grandmother had chosen for my mother. My father had chosen what truths I could handle. My mother had chosen silence because she feared rejection. Diane had chosen money because she feared ruin. For 23 years, my family called those choices protection. They were really fear. I used to think betrayal came from people who stopped loving you. Now I know some of the deepest betrayals come from people who love you very much but believe their love gives them permission to control your life. I never completely forgave my grandmother. I did eventually forgive my father. And my mother? We are still working on that. Some weeks I call her every night. Some weeks I cannot answer the phone. But we no longer pretend the past can be repaired. We are trying to build something new in the space it left behind. Because forgiveness, I learned, is not saying what happened was acceptable. Sometimes forgiveness is simply refusing to let someone else's worst decision make all of your future ones. And every now and then, my mother and I open another letter. There are still 31 left. Maybe that sounds strange. But after 23 stolen years, I don't want to read them too quickly. They are painful. They are beautiful. And for the first time in my life, nobody else gets to decide when I'm ready. If you were Claire, could you ever forgive a mother who stayed away for 23 years after being manipulated into believing you rejected her? And who betrayed Claire more? Her mother for leaving, her father for lying, or her grandmother for deciding she knew what was best for everyone? I'd really like to know what you would have done, or what you would have done, or what you would have done.